I read Androne by Dwain Worrell. This is a reread for me. It's part of a series. I'm going to talk about the second book in the next podcast. Androne is a science fiction novel. It's set in a future where a mysterious event called the 99 has happened, where a significant portion of the world's military infrastructure is destroyed instantaneously, along with most of the major cities around the globe. And there's no explanation as to what enemy did this or how it was accomplished. And so it's a very mysterious event that happens in the kind of backstory and is the primary motivation for the military taking action throughout the story. But the main character of the story is a guy named Paxton, and he's low level. I think he's in the Air Force, United States Air Force. He's a mechanic, and he has ambitions to be more than that. He comes from a military family, but he's not doing much to achieve his goals. And he has a kid on the way with his girlfriend. But because the military is shorthanded, they call him up into service for piloting a drone that gives the novel its name, Androne. And these are kind of like android-looking robots that are a little bit bigger than a normal person, and basically kind of like a Terminator robot or something like that. And it's Paxton's job to pilot this thing part of the time, and then he switches over to a co-pilot, and she pilots it the rest of the time. And by getting into this program, he's getting a little bit closer to what the military knows about the mysterious disappearance of all that stuff in the past, and also the mystery of what is going on. Another mystery that's introduced early on is the idea of the collaborator, which is what the military call one of the drone pilots who seems to be helping their enemy. Although when Paxton goes out on his patrols, he never sees anybody or anything. It's just like a huge zone of desert that he's supposed to patrol. At one point, he's given a gadget by a kind of raving man who's being arrested. And this gadget, when he brings it into, it's like a little metal sphere. When he brings it into the Androne, it turns off its connection to the tracking technology that the military uses to know if he's within his designated zone or not. And so he leaves the zone and finds out, where he is, what's going on. He tries to get a better sense of the battlefield and who exactly the enemy is and stuff like that. And what he ends up seeing is that he's in some version of San Francisco, but it looks post-apocalyptic, which is pretty much what's happening. It turns out that somehow the Androne is sending back a signal through time to his pilot's nest. And he's actually piloting this drone in the future. And so his signals are being transmitted up to a satellite, which is banking all the information. And then it's going to release that information later. And that's how the robot moves around in the future. And the reason that the military is doing this is because the attack of the 99 or whatever they call it came from the future into the past somehow. They don't explain this in the first book. But basically, the military is trying to fight back against forces that somehow reached into the past and destroyed civilization. Paxton gets into San Francisco. He goes to baseball stadium there, and there are people who are subsisting the best they can in a kind of collective farm situation. And they're using the stadium as a safe place. and then at the same time, like growing food in there and stuff. And these people don't speak English. They have a completely different culture than Americans. And it seems like civilization has walked backward technologically. And so they're much more like the kind of technology that you would see from thousands of years ago than the type of society that could like make robots and have satellites and things like that. So it's unclear how these people could be a threat to a technologically advanced society like the one that he lives in. And he becomes sympathetic with them, which Paxton's characterization early in the story is that he seems like pretty emotionally numb. He seems ambivalent about the pregnancy of his girlfriend, his feelings around his girlfriend. Like he likes to be with her, he likes to have sex with her, but he doesn't really seem to care about her as a person. He thinks about his family and doesn't have very strong feelings about them in terms of love or hatred or whatever. And he doesn't have close friendships within the military ranks that he's a part of. There's a lot of like paranoid feelings, suspicion, and stuff like that he feels for everyone around him. But when he sees these people in the future, he seems to form a close emotional bond with them right away. And it's almost as if by being in front of screens and controlling robots, he feels a closer connection to people than he would otherwise, like that he sees face to face in his real life. I think this speaks to like a kind of modern type of relationship that we have to media like video games, television, and movies, and even books to a certain degree, that some people are more comfortable forming attachments to fictional characters or characters that, you know, people that are on screens than they are to people who are there right in front of them. Because sometimes when Paxton is confronted with difficult situations, he becomes a coward. He's a moral coward for most of the book. But when he is piloting the Androne, he's extremely brave and capable. And so he seems to have a different personality when he's in charge of the Androne. In any case, he forms an attachment to these people and he wants to protect them. One of the other Andrones discovers the civilian population here and starts attacking them. And so he attacks back. And then for the rest of the book, there's a lot of action that happens. Pretty good action scenes, you know, like science fiction military type stuff. And it's important also that when this happens, he implicates his co-pilot who has to pilot the Androne like when he's not with it. And so she's going to find out the secret that he's off mission, he's not in the zone that he's supposed to be in, and that he's helping out these people that they're probably not even supposed to know about, let alone be helping. But she is also drawn in to their situation. She feels a lot of empathy for them and wants to help them out. And so she ends up joining him basically in doing this off-mission stuff. And the rest of the book is the two of them trading off and slowly realizing that they are the collaborator that everyone has this paranoia around finding. But because Paxton is from a military family, he experiences a lot of nepotism in terms of his advancement, and he's drawn into the inner circle of what's going on in terms of the military secrets and stuff. And so he is protected from being interrogated when they're trying to find out who this pilot is. Like, basically they think, oh, it couldn't possibly be him because, you know, he comes from such a good, upstanding military family. And so that is what allows him for the rest of the book to fully become the collaborator and help these people from the future. basically he views them as civilians. He gives his own name to them. He doesn't see them as military operatives. And he's just trying to protect them from the military hardware of his own time from killing them. Because they're just like people. They don't have tanks and advanced weaponry and stuff. And so he feels a need to protect them. All through this protection, though, like I said, there's a contrasting when he's not in the Androne pilot thing. His girlfriend, who's going to have a baby soon, is having serious problems with the pregnancy, and he never goes to her. He forgets to call her all the time. He doesn't call his grandfather or the rest of his family. And when he's presented with situations where they might find out that he is the collaborator or he has opportunities to help the people in the future, but doing so would mean that he would reveal himself as a traitor, he chickens out and doesn't do the morally consistent thing. And so he's only brave when he's like locked into this piloting apparatus that is like completely closed off and can only be opened from the inside. But he helps out the people from the future to the point where they end up getting some kind of map that's going to give them more information about like how they can effectively fight back against the Andrones. And at various times, he is piloting other drones. And this is the kind of like moral failure that I'm talking about, where he's part of a larger squad that's hunting down the collaborator. And so he's actually fighting himself. So he, as the collaborator, he fights a battle, and then later he ends up being on the other side of it because of the time delay effect that's going on. And so sometimes he's fighting against the people in the future, and sometimes he's fighting with them, which I think kind of illustrates a type of ambivalence towards the military and towards like the entire idea of like fighting an enemy that you're not seeing face to face, a kind of ambivalence towards industrialized modern warfare. It's unclear who the enemy is, why the enemy is. It kind of doesn't matter. It's all about orders. And then the people who are executing those orders are kind of cowards. I think that asymmetry kind of symbolizes the entire Iraq, Afghanistan war of the early 2000s, because it seems to me that like the 99 event that takes out so much of the military is kind of like the Pearl Harbor attack, but also the 9/11 attack on the Twin Towers in New York City and the Pentagon. And just the sea change in American awareness that happened because of that, and the retaliation that happened that was like completely out of proportion, because there was a feeling in America anyway that like the people who started that war all died in the actual attack. And then we invaded various countries trying to stop that ideology from spreading and more attacks from happening in the future. But all we ended up doing was like ruining the societies of the people in those places and kind of like causing more problems. Like the war didn't solve problems, in other words. And who exactly is the enemy is unclear in that war, in the same way that it's unclear in this war. And so like by using the science fiction setting, it kind of unglues our sense of how war is supposed to work. There's not any geographical difference between the two enemy groups. There's not ethnic differences. There's not like separate nations and different armies fighting each other, various conflicting ideologies. All of that stuff is subtracted out by having the time travel element. And so we're just kind of like examining war as a concept and as a human tool for solving problems. And all it actually seems to do is cause more problems. That's kind of like what is happening symbolically in the book. And so I think it pulls on various modern wars. You know, like in Afghanistan, drones were used heavily for the first time in a military conflict. And so this is, like kind of germane to the subject of the book. There's also a kind of dialogical effect, I think, that happens because of the time travel element, where you have these two conflicting sides, the people in the future and the people in the current timeline, the present, Paxton's present. But one of those groups causes the other, and the other group causes the other. So, like, they each cause each other because the attack came from the future originally. The retaliation of the past and trying to control or eliminate that event from happening, it seems to actually cause the event in the first place. So because the attack coming from the future, like some future date, the military tries to like attack the person who perpetrates this attack. They're called the Peacemaker. That's all they know about their name. They're the Peacemaker. They try to kill Peacemaker before they make that attack. And this will cause the attack to not happen. And then that would somehow like fix society, I guess. But of course, in trying to kill Peacemaker before they have perpetrated the attack, this is what causes Peacemaker to, in their mind, retaliate against these attacks and a lifetime filled with war. And so in the same way as the Allied forces in Iraq and Afghanistan going into those places and retaliating for the attacks that were made in America, they end up causing all kinds of new enemies to emerge within those countries. And so like war just creates more war. And I call it dialogical because they are each feeding into the other. There's a kind of paradox or contradiction at the heart of how the book operates in terms of its cause and effect because of the time travel element to the story. But I think this is an important concept for how war itself works. War is a paradox. If we actually examine its effect on society, it does not create peaceful societies. It does not eliminate or bring justice to these conflicts. It just causes more conflicts in the future. One of the stronger symbolic themes that goes on throughout the book has to do with gender. Early on in the book, Paxton thinks about his masculinity a lot and how it relates to his girlfriend, and she's having a baby and he feels sure that it's going to be a boy. And he thinks about the way that when he was born, his mother died, and that probably whenever his girlfriend has his son, it will kill his girlfriend and then their relationship will be over. So that entire situation is pretty weird. The other big thing that is going on with gender is that when they're talking about the andrones in terms of like the way that you would talk about like a Navy ship or something, you would call the ship a she. And in the same way, they call the Androne a she. And it's co-piloted by Paxton, and his co-pilot is a woman. And many of the other supporting characters in the book are women. And I think that Paxton's sense of masculinity is very twisted and unhealthy. And that a lot of the book's journey is him coming to a more vulnerable place where he is able to feel affection and love. But even that is like only a very beginning version of those feelings and not a very healthy or mature version of them, I would say. But I don't think that this is an accident. Worrell's sensibility in the book, it seems to me, is this journey into the feminine. And he even thinks of himself near the end of the book in feminine terms when he's piloting the Androne. And even the name Androne has to do with like the kind of chemicals in the human body that help to create testosterone. And so masculinity is just kind of like folded into the concept of Androne as a novel, and it's exploring it. And I would say also that's part of the reason why the whole military thing is there too, because it's such a masculine enterprise throughout history. Men as warriors, it's an essential identity within masculine communities throughout history and cultures. But of course, in this military, there are lots of women, like I said. So you've got his co-pilot, another woman that's important in the story. Her name is Bella, and he cheats on his girlfriend with Bella. And Bella, as a name, means beautiful, of course. But it's revealed later in the book that everyone has been mispronouncing her name this whole time. And actually, her name is Bellum. And this is the name means war. And so she is a warrior, and she becomes the primary rival to Paxton. And even Paxton's name includes in it Pax, which is Latin for peace. And so it's like peace and war against each other at the end of the book, symbolically right there in their names. Additionally, the civilians that he's helping out, the ones that he's the most attached to, he calls her the old oak, is a woman. And she's trying to protect a young girl who she calls Harm, which, as a name is quite loaded with symbolism that this person is harmful or does harm or is the product of harm in some way. And Paxton is afraid that harm will come to her, and he's very protective of her throughout the book. She's actually the first person that he ever meets, and they become friends. It's part of the reason why he helps the civilians in the first place is because of harm. But at the end of the book, we find out that her name is actually Harmony, and that through their translation that they're doing of their language, because they don't actually speak English, her name actually means in their own language, peacemaker, and that she is the young peacemaker that they've been trying to hunt down for the entire book in order to stop the 99 from happening in the first place. But because of his decisions as the collaborator, he ends up protecting her from the military, and that is what leads to her being able to actually survive and learn about the technology of the andrones that will help facilitate her ability to pull off the 99 later. And so mainly what he does throughout the book is protect her. His attachment to these women and his working alongside these women, it ends up, like I said, kind of arcing him into a softer, more vulnerable place around his feelings towards his girlfriend. And eventually you find out that she has the baby. She doesn't die from having the baby, and she doesn't deliver a son. She delivers a daughter. And he feels that he's going to be able to love the daughter, and that through loving the daughter, he will be able to love his girlfriend even more, or sufficiently, for them to be a long-term couple, because she is the mother of his child, which, like I said, is not very healthy, but he was never emotionally healthy to begin with. And so it's better, I guess, to have affection and feel love towards people and some empathy than just to be following orders and be trying to climb the military ladder because you think that's what you should be doing, but you don't really have any other sense of your identity yourself. It's through practicing empathy while he's in the Androne piloting chamber that he's able to, outside of the chamber, start to have more moral integrity and also more affection and love for his actual family, his daughter, his girlfriend, and so on. And so there's an idea that this virtual space that he's inhabiting is allowing him to practice being a better man. And it does produce real results for him in his real life, even though those results are, quite limited in their scope and they're only the beginning of a more healthy relationship with everyone around him. At the end of the book, he refuses to come out of the piloting chamber because he's trying to protect Harmony from the final assault that everyone is doing. And this causes his Androne to be completely shut down because of an EMP that Harmony is able to blast off, which disables all of the Andrones around her, and she's able to escape and get to safety. However, she saves the Androne that Pax has been piloting this whole time and repairs it. And so there's a kind of time skip for him in the cockpit where it shuts off because of the EMP. And then about 12 years seem to pass in the future. But for him, it's an instantaneous, 1 or 2 seconds. And when he starts piloting the Androne again, the military are breaking into the cockpit. And so he knows that she has this thing close to her because she has this emotional connection to Pax through it. She doesn't understand even maybe that there's a pilot behind the scenes, but she cares about the Androne itself because she formed this emotional attachment to it. But he knows that if she keeps it close and she's repaired it, that the military is going to have the ability to kill her right there. And so he has actually delivered them the very thing that they have been trying to do for the entire book. And in the final moments of the book, he finally makes this decision of moral integrity as the cockpit is being taken apart and they're spraying in pepper spray and all of this stuff and yelling at him and threatening him and trying to stop him from doing anything. He takes the weapon of the Androne, turns it around on himself, and kind of commits suicide via the Androne. So he disables the mech in the future and makes it so that they can't use it to assassinate Harmony and prevent the 99 from happening. And so he finally decides to take a side in the conflict and suffers the consequences of it because he is taken out of the cockpit and then he is sentenced to prison where he goes into solitary confinement. And at the very end of the book, we find out that the NSA is interested in working with him because they feel that there's going to be some kind of a prison break attempted on his behalf from people in the future. And that's where the story leaves off. And so I think there's a lot of complicated symbolism and interesting themes that are underneath the surface. There's a difficult kind of characterization of Paxton where he is kind of two different people throughout the book, and neither one of those people is very strongly motivated. But I think that it speaks to a certain relationship that we have to our culture these days of, we go to work and we have an awareness that the work that all of us is doing is having a negative effect on the future that we are giving to future generations, that there's going to be a tall price to pay environmentally and probably even technologically for us in the future. No matter what our jobs are, our entire culture is moving us in a direction that maybe we would not want it to go to, but we're not sure how to change things. And if we did want to act on behalf of the future, which I think that most of us actually do want that, we would have to actively choose to work against our self-interests as it relates to our work and our careers and the goals of our wider culture. We would turn ourselves into pariahs and criminals by doing what is best for the future. And because of that, it's not only a very difficult moral choice, but I think the characterization of Pax is reflecting something back to the reader about their own relationship to work and their feelings about a possible future that is going to be bleak and difficult for everyone in it, and the degree to which we are responsible for that in the future. And so whatever feelings I have towards Paxton of like, man, pick a side, like have more integrity, I could also say that about myself and my relationship to the future and how I just choose to go along with the goals of my company because I don't want to be homeless. I want my family to have a house and be able to feed my kids and one day to have a retirement and not have to work so much. But also, I want to be comfortable and I don't want to deal with being a social pariah or a possible criminal. And so, even though I don't think it's a great way to be, I still live in that morally divided kind of chicken position where I'm not living according to my best judgment. I think the future would be better off if I made other choices and took a stand on certain things as it relates to my career and other people's careers, and there should be stronger laws and all of that kind of thing. But I'm not really doing much to cause that to happen. And the book underlines that in a way that it is kind of uncomfortable. And it has to do with Pax's characterization. But that characterization is so unusual in books that I think that it comes off to a lot of readers as just being sloppy, poor writing. But that's the kind of thing that I don't really believe in. I just try to take the book as it is and then interpret and analyze its themes and structures according to what I see actually there on the page and not try to compare it to some kind of hypothetical book or the way that things are quote unquote supposed to be. And so, yeah, what I see is an interesting characterization that reflects something back to me about society and my own place in it. And these themes will be blown out even more in the following book, Alliance.